So, hello everybody, and welcome to one of our weekly sessions at the Backyard Peace Project. And today I'm joined by a phenomenal group of people. We're ready to have a really uncomfortable conversation. And the reason that we do this is because, like, the algorithms are keeping us away from people that think differently to us, which is problematic. And we have, unfortunately, in the age of technology, often learned how to not connect in difficult ways, how to block, how to cancel, instead of leaning in with curiosity and having an uncomfortable conversation so that we can use the bricks that have been given to us to build bridges and not walls. So that's why we come together every Wednesday. That's why we have these conversations. We talk about things that possibly we don't normally talk about. I'm normally the one that comes in and says, this is how I've messed up this week. Let's discuss. Because I think it's really important to lead from a place of authenticity. So yeah, we do our inner work, we show up, we're qualified, we've got experience, but we also have a human experience ourselves. And I really feel it's important not to deny that. So, guys, thank you so much for all being here. I'm thrilled to have you. We've got people asking for recordings now. So, I feel like the conversations we're having are impactful and they're important. So, I'm really thrilled to be getting that traction. So, welcome to you all on the call. As per usual, I'm going to introduce the topic, but I have given you a bit of a heads up this week where normally my ambassadors never had a clue. I just go, and we're discussing this. And they were like, ah. So, this week, I've just let the audience know what we're talking about. And just as a disclaimer before we start, I have spoken to my husband this morning and have permission to share what I'm going to share. So I was like, babe, like our marriage comes first. Like, are you okay with me sharing this? Like, yeah, absolutely. So just to let you know that I have asked for permission. So I wanted to talk this week about conflict. So I'm seeing so much conflict out there. Conflict in workplaces, conflict in education settings, conflict in the world, conflict online, and also conflict within self. So I feel like this is a really broad topic that has a very personal meaning to everybody that comes across it. So we have people who are absolutely ready for conflict 24/7, and there are reasons for that, guys. Like, as a trauma specialist, I can tell you that there are reasons for that. We have people that avoid conflict at all costs. Again, there are reasons for that. Everybody on this call today has experience, both professionally and personally, with conflict. So that's why I love these conversations, because we're speaking from truth, we're speaking from experience, not just textbook expertise. So what I have learned about conflict, and I am not like Mother Teresa when it comes to conflict. Do you know what I mean? Like I have to work through my big emotions sometimes. Sometimes something can catch me off guard, and I have like a sick feeling in my stomach, or I have a rage feeling in my body, especially if it's got to do with my family, right? Because I'm really protective of my family. Um, so it's I feel like unless you're Buddha, it is something that you need to intentionally practice in your day-to-day life every day. You know, there are moments where I've snapped at my kids and I'm like, God damn it. Do you know what I mean? That was just because I'm tired. I'm stressed. I've asked them 11 to 9 times, but I didn't want it to get to that point. And that's on me. It's the way, and we unpack that as a family and go, I'm really sorry I shouldn't have spoken like that. And then one of my kids will go, in fairness, you did ask us 6 times. I'm like, yeah, I did, but still, I shouldn't have reacted like that. And so what I want to say is we're all fallible. Like we're all human and we all have that experience. But my whole life has been dedicated to the study of human behavior. And so, right from a young age, like when I was 5 years old, growing up in a narcissistic household, you bet your bottom dollar I was observing. I was watching. I was listening. I was learning those unspoken rules of how to survive quietly, how to not be in the spotlight, how to do that, how to navigate my little world with all these big people and stay out of trouble, like stay out of the zone. Of course, that taught me to be quiet and never use my voice, which my husband will be thrilled to tell you that that's no longer the case. I use my voice frequently. But what it enabled me to observe in childhood was the reasons behind the behavior. So I was seeing behavior, but I was also able to have that distance and that perspective to be able to look behind the behavior and see the cause of the behavior. So then I went and did a sociology degree, then I was in teaching, and I remember being very tuned in with the kids. So they could walk through the door and I'd be like, something's happened. Like I'm very empathic and I was very, very tuned in. And I think that was the training that I had in my childhood. But what it enabled me to do was from a very young age, look at the behavior that was, we'll label it as conflict, whether it was physical, mental, whatever, emotional, and look behind it to see what was causing it and respond from that place, which resulted in really good outcomes. And what I learned to do as well from a very young age is observe leaders in my world. So I remember very clearly in England, we've got a place called Sainsbury's, which is very much like Woolworths. And I worked there for many years as a student. And there was one particular female leader, which was very unusual in those days. And I remember watching her very carefully on how she dealt with conflict. And these are like really irate male customers. And the way she diffused that, it fascinated me. So I would like be on my till, like scanning and just watching her and like trying to learn from her. And then I sort of looked at why people are thrown into conflict and what to do about that. So we had an incident yesterday, and this is where I got my permission from my husband to talk about it. I was in meetings all day yesterday. I had a massive day. So I started at 7:30 in the morning, didn't finish till 8:30 at night. And when I got through my morning block of meetings, I opened my phone and it had blown up from my husband, right? Angry face emojis, red angry face emojis, profanity, like he could have got a certificate in it. I was like, what is going on? And he was dealing with a government agency, say no more, and they were being difficult and they were asking this and they were asking that. And he has so much stress in his life and so much responsibility in his life, and he has so many targets per day. He was like, I can't do this. And so he lost it. And so he came through to me. They wanted a big letter explaining something. And he was like, babe. And I was like, just leave it with me. I'm like, this is why I handle all of this stuff and you don't, because he's very quick to flare. And I provided the letter. We got the outcome that we wanted. But when I sent him the letter, I just put, here's your letter. It's a good job. You're cute. Love you, stroppy pants. Because I was like, seriously, you need to chill. Do you know what I mean? This was not worth your blood pressure going up this high. But obviously, I know that's not who he is as a person. I know for sure he didn't speak to the person on the phone badly. He vented to me, which was fine. And I dealt with it, which was fine. But it's so interesting, the people that haven't got that filter. So it's like we call it, I think it's called sublimation. So you get treated badly at work by your boss, you come home and kick the cat. Right. So it's this channeled in the wrong direction, but you're expressing it in some way. And so what has made me really interested as well is I've had some really intricate, complex, challenging situations to get through with groups of professionals. And so many people are leading from a place, and Deirdre and I have talked about this, leading from a place of trauma, trigger, and so therefore, when it comes to dealing with conflict, they don't lead the team in conflict because they're avoidant of it or they're over aggressively stepping forward into it. And so that's been really interesting as well, because it's so crazy to me. And I suppose I've spent the last 30 years getting in touch with my voice, getting in touch with my power, giving myself permission to express myself, because I had to undo the social conditioning that I had in my childhood. And sometimes I do it and my knees shake, for sure. I've taken on institutions who have been prejudiced against my children because of their ASD diagnoses. You know, I've done the hard things. I've cried at home while I've been doing it, but I did it because it was the right thing to do. So you can use your voice and still feel fear. You can still feel scared. You can still feel upset. But the amount of professionals that I've come across in these institutions that are archaic do not deal with conflict well. They cannot have the conversation, which is problematic, particularly in an education sector where they're racing, they're teaching and educating the next generation. So with the Backyard Peace Project, our tagline is World Peace Begins in Our Own Backyards. We all know here, we all serve in one way or another. We all know that it starts with us. It starts with inner peace. It's not somebody else's problem. It's our issue. Like it starts with our calibration that filters out into our families, that filters out into our communities, that filters out into the world, right? Um, so we understand that. Um, but my interest is, and I know Shirley as well has got a very unique take on conflict, and her story is very powerful. So I'm so pleased you're here, Shirley. I did a little secret, little prayer. Is Shirley going to see this? And is she going to come on? So I'm really pleased that you're here. Because I'd really love to unpack this, because in the world at the moment, it does seem to be dominated with some variety of conflict. I'm opening up the floor.
Hi, Cathy, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah, I do love this topic. And I think it's mainly because I myself, I was not the victim of conflict. I was causing the conflict for so long in my married life. Um, I married a total opposite of who I am. Like I am that person. If you look at me on a graphic, I would be like that. And my husband would be like this. He's just always constantly exactly the same. And I'm a real firecracker. Like I'm up and down. Since a very young age, with my mom and living with, growing up with our parents, like you say, we are conditioned, in a certain way. My husband and I had total different perspective. We grew up completely in two different worlds. And I think that is where it actually starts. So everything was a misunderstanding. From when we woke up in the morning until we go to sleep, we just did not understand each other. With the conversations that we had, what we were trying to accomplish for that day, it was all a misunderstanding. And then I felt unheard, but he also felt unheard. So then you try and push your point through, and you want to make it more obvious. So then you get louder. I got louder because that's how my mum used to deal with it. She became like really loud, shouting, wanting to get her point through. I never really realized this until I had my youngest son, Justin, who now is also dyslexic and he's got severe ADHD, that he cannot operate when I shout and when I scream at this boy. He shuts down completely. He starts crying. He goes into like almost a fetal position and he's so scared. And I realized that was me. When I look at Justin, I realized that was me when I was younger, but no one noticed. My mum didn't stop screaming. She didn't stop shouting, you know. And then, which ended up me going into the wrong relationships, being in wrong with wrong friends, wrong groups, because you constantly, unheard and trying to get your group that is, open to how you think and how you do. And if you're not, then you create the conflict. So I can happily say that I'm happily married now for the past year. We've been married for almost 14 years, but for the past year, this has been the best year that we've ever had because I had to change. Not my husband, not my people who I'm living around. I actually had to change. And that happened when I actually listened. When I was listening to them, not just them hearing me, because I thought I'm going to make my point. They will listen to what I have to say, and nothing happened. So when I actually went and I sat down and I had a conversation with my husband, I had a conversation with my son, and I just shut the flipping hell up. I could say it a much better way, but I just literally shut my mouth and I said, for now, for once in my life, I'm going to just listen to because I want to make it better. I don't want to live in this situation anymore. Everyone is unhappy. And I'm on the verge of actually thinking, it's better me and my husband don't get separated again. And I didn't want to do that, to my kids. So by listening, oh my gosh, I heard stuff that my husband said that I never thought of. And I never thought of it that way. And even with my two boys, I didn't have a relationship with my older son, but today we have the most beautiful relationship just because I listened. And just because I listened, I was able to change. And it's still, I'm still working on it because remember, you come from a lot of conditioning. It's hard work, But when you really love someone, or when you really want to change the situation, I believe with all my heart, when you really listen, you can make a difference and you can change and you can stop the entire conflict.
I love that, Shirley. What I love about it is that communication element, because I do believe that there's so many conflicts that are based on a miscommunication.
Yeah.
Connie, can you tell your story again about when you were working and you had an incident, a cultural incident at your work, shaking hands with somebody?
Oh, yes. Um, that was very interesting. Yeah, that's back in the days when I was working at the bank and I was a mortgage officer, and I had an immigrant family, um, and got the mortgage all approved. I had to put the whole family on the mortgage, but got the mortgage approved, and I was excited for them because, of course, I had to do a lot of convincing at the bank to get this approved. And immediately I went to shake the father's hand as the head of household, congratulating him. He, being from a Muslim country, was not used to a woman shaking a man's hand. And he just looked at me in terror. I looked at him in terror. And the interpreter quickly said to me, he's not used to this, just a second. Explained to him in his language, that this was customary in Canada, that it was fine to do this, and business women will shake men's hands. And then he explained to me, the custom. I didn't even know this, prior to that. And so he looked at me, he shook the hand, he smiled, but it showed me very quickly how misunderstandings could happen. Like, thank heavens for the interpreter. And I could have left that situation thinking very negatively of the culture that he came from, him being a man. Of course, as a woman, I was trying to progress my way through the bank. So I'm like, what's the big deal here? But having somebody that could explain to bring the two sides together was very helpful. And it actually really changed me, because when I later met somebody with an accent from another country, I was then curious. Where are you from? What do you miss about home? Those types of things. But yeah, it could have been a very negative situation. And so that's why I often say to people, be curious about the other person, why they're reacting the way that they are, or why they're reacting in a way that you're not expecting.
Mm. And it is interesting when you have those situations, because as you know, we're a very multicultural family, and both of my eldest two have got partners from different cultures, different countries. Do you know what I mean? We're very multicultural, and that has been a really interesting experience for me. To not immediately take offense or not immediately be irritated by something, which can happen, especially in your home, right? Where you've got a certain way of doing things. And as you say, Connie, leaning in with curiosity, because one of the things that I was doing that upset my bonus daughter was when she would do something for me, because she's God, he has hit the jackpot with this girl. I tell you what, I've told him, you better just, it's all right getting her, but you got to keep her. Like, you got to up your game, because she's amazing. And she's so supportive. And one of the times it was Mother's Day, and the children organized Mother's Day, and the older ones organized to take me out for lunch. Well, that's never happened. I was a little bit like, I'm out of my comfort zone. I haven't organized it. I've lost control. What's going on? And I was immediately like, well, we can't do that because there's nobody to look after the kids, and who's going to do this and who's going to do that. And my bonus daughter had said, no, 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 I'm going to babysit, so you guys can go off. And I just thought, how generous is that to say, I'm going to stay out of this fun thing to look after your children while my boyfriend takes you out for lunch. Do you know? I was like, it's amazing. So where every time she would do something like that, I would give a little gift, because that's my love language is gift giving. And I was doing that. I do it for my daughter. I do it for my kids. I do it for my friends. It's just, that's my way of showing affection and appreciation. But the feedback was it was upsetting her. I was like, why? And because she wants to be so much part of the family that I don't need to give a gift because it's just expected, kind of, that that's just what we do because we're part of a family. So now, if I do get her a gift, because I accidentally sometimes trip up and something ends up in my trolley, I don't know how it happens, I'll just be like, I'll throw it at her and go, it's just because there's nothing you've done. And I just throw it and run. And now she knows that's my way of expressing love. She knows now not to take it personally, but I also don't do it every time because I want her to feel like part of the family. But that, if not spoken, that could have ended up being a little bit of resentment because I might have read her reaction to me giving her a gift like she didn't like it or she wasn't appreciative of it or whatever. And she could have just gone, well, she doesn't want me to be part of the family because she keeps giving me gifts, which is very formal in her eyes. So that was super interesting, just a little thing. But if we hadn't have been, and our family is very open to having very excruciatingly uncomfortable conversations, sometimes to the point I'm going, la, 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 la. I don't want to know, but I'm here. But I also don't want to, but I am here. But it's great that we have that because we want a big, close, happy family, and we have to be able to open ourselves up to another possibility and another perspective.
Cathy, it's something that I was wondering about from a conflict, and I don't have the answer, so I'm kind of throwing it out there. But is there situations or can conflict arise more often for a person who has maybe grown up, never felt heard? So, as opposed to everything going well in the family, but sort of that children are seen and not heard kind of thing. Like, we'll address you when we're ready. Other than that, you just be a good little girl. And um, can that cause a person to experience more conflict, maybe as an adult, because they're remembering as a child they weren't heard, and maybe that ends up being a constant in their relationships going forward, and then they just at times blow because they don't feel heard.
Yeah, Pip, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. But it won't be the only thing. So almost anything that we bring from our childhood is going to impact how we experience further relationship. So you might have somebody who is it's really funny how the whole thing plays out. Like, I'm just thinking about a woman at the moment who experienced never being seen or heard because that was the culture in her family. She thought that was perfectly normal, but then turns up in her relationship with, and I wouldn't call it conflict so much, but for her, it's about, she still doesn't feel seen and heard because unless he actually approaches it in a very specific way, she's still in that space. So like the one experience can manifest in lots of different ways, and this is the tricky part about doing the work with adults later, is figuring out how are they manifesting this trauma or experience in their childhood. So the short answer is yes, it can, but it actually probably it may also be something completely different that shows up in that in conflict, or it may be that same thing shows up in a different way for that particular person, and it probably has to do with a lot of different scripts or programming that kind of happen. And that's the fun of therapy and coaching, right, is unraveling that and going all the way back to see exactly how they play out. If you've got the capacity to do that, and some people just want to fix it, which is fine. They don't care how it got there. They just want it gone. But for me, I think when I'm working with parents particularly, there's a fascination with where it came from because they want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So how do they show up in a different way so that they're not perpetuating the same programming and the same forward motion, you know? And so for parents particularly, there's a real curiosity around, well, and most of them don't even know how it happened, right? Like most of them don't know how they ended up with this particular slant on life, until someone points it out, you know, and draws a line between the outcome now or the way that they're parenting now versus how they were parented. And because often we go the complete opposite with our own children, right? But then we go the complete opposite, and it ends up being, you know, really, it ends up being wrong for a different reason. So, you know, somebody who maybe didn't feel seen and heard as a child will be helicopter parent, right, to their own children, and so then they end up with not with children who feel nervous about or hovered over and don't feel like they can be independent without hurting their mum's feelings, right? Like, so we have to, if once we understand though, it becomes really fascinating to then where's the balance? Where do we how do we do this with letting go but holding on? And I think understanding the sequence of how maturation occurs is a really big key to that. But yeah, I've gone off topic. But yes and no.
In a nutshell. Well, here's the thing though. I mean, when you're talking, Pip, I mean, you know my story and the story that Sky and I published in the book, that was in Times Square and went to #1. That was about our conversation about the trauma that's trickled down through my parenting to her. Now, that was excruciating for me to receive because my whole life has been about intention and consciousness and healing my stuff and not passing on the pieces. But as you said, Pip, you don't catch it. And you say about the shards, and you can make something beautiful from the shards. And you know, when I heard from her, it was about my whole adult life I've dieted. Okay. At this moment in my life, I'm actually healing and my body is responding. But that's what I'm doing, is healing and my body is responding. I found a way that truly suits me. I thought at one point I was going to have a heart attack and die. I was that ill. And 3 months, 4 months on, I'm feeling calm. I'm feeling steady. My body's responding. I'm thinking, oh my God, thank God. Like I found the right thing, because I was following everything the doctor said, it wasn't working. And so all of my adult life, I've been trying to, what my daughter said, shrink yourself. I watched you constantly trying to shrink yourself. And with that, there's a lot of fat shaming. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of everything. You do that to yourself anyway, but then you go out into the world and that amplifies because everyone's doing it too. And so those were the pieces. And I never spoke about it. I always spoke about body positivity. I always encouraged them to be themselves. I never spoke about myself badly. I was very consciously aware of that. But she would see me at the table with all these diet books and magazines, writing out plans of how I was going to shrink myself, right? And so I handed that piece to her. And when she told me, I'm going to be truthful here and say my knee-jerk reaction was to defend myself and go, hey, but look at all the crap that I saved you from, right? But that wasn't the conversation. The conversation was her having the faith in our relationship and the trust to be able to go, hey, Mum, love you. We have a fantastic relationship. I'm very, very lucky. Love you enough, trust you enough to tell you this. And I had like 11.9 million emotions in that next 30 seconds, which I worked through very quickly, and just said, tell me. And I just sat, and as you said, Shirley, listened. Yeah. And so that was healing for her, and it was healing for me.
Yeah. And if I just want to also add something to what Connie was asking and what Philippa says, I think maybe it's also not just the unseen and unheard, but I know with my father, he was and I never realized this. To me, my father was this hero, you know, he was the king on his little throne. But the thing is, later in life, I realized how insecure my father actually really was, you know, while I was growing up. And it was just little bits and things that he was doing. So I found myself, before I was in this relationship with this man, I found myself in a terrible domestic violent relationship with another man because I was sort of seeking that same circumstances that I grew up in. My dad wasn't violent, not at all, but he was a very dominating type of person because he didn't feel, you know, because he was insecure. So he wanted to make his point. So then that's what I was seeking. So later on in life, I realized that all the roads that I was taking was how I grew up. This is what I saw. This is what was familiar. And, you know, this has now led me up until where I was actually facing gunpoint, you know, my husband at the time, because we had so much conflict. Because I wanted to make my point. He didn't want to make his point, but then he wanted to take it a step further and say, well, if you don't basically shut up, I'm going to kill you. You know, and so that is it's so sad because, and that's one of the reasons, and I see here, Deirdre says, it's a powerful skill to listen. The thing is, I had to start listening because I could not allow my two boys to go through the same thing that I went through, you know, learning the hard way to come to end up where I am actually now today, you know, because I think all of this could have been avoided if my dad had just gone for counseling for what he had gone through, you know, or just, you know, worked with someone. I think all of this could have been avoided.
We all have to take responsibility at some point to make the shift and make the change. And that's the whole point of the Backyard Peace Project, right? Is saying it starts with me. I'm the one who's going to change the future for my children, for my grandchildren. And it's really interesting now being a grandmother. And there are 4 generations on our property, so we're all in close contact. And look, my parents, there was lots of amazing things. There was lots of amazing things in how my parents parented, but there was also some stuff that was just shit. And so, nobody would have called docs on my parents, but my mum doesn't have a relationship with some of her children. So, there was some stuff that went down because of how she, her trauma happened, and there was stuff in their relationship because of how his, dad was, and all of that sort of stuff. So it keeps going down. But as a mother who's teaching a mother how to mother differently than how I mothered her, especially in her younger years. Now, I got some stuff right too, and I got some stuff wrong. I did lots of really good, lots of close contact. I wore my babies. I slept with my babies. I did everything I could to keep them so that they knew I had their back. But I also did some stuff wrong. And so, or that I would now say I wouldn't do again. And I watch my daughter and my mother have these conversations. And then I'm sitting in here going, actually, we can do it a better way. And then trying to impart that so that my granddaughter has a different experience. It's a really interesting piece. And there's part of the listening, but listening without judgment as well, without judgment of ourselves. And, Cathy, you had to do that when, you listened to your daughter. It was listening, but without judging them, but also without judging ourselves, and being able to show up with compassion for ourselves and say, yeah, you know what? I made mistakes, and I did the very best I possibly could with what I had at the time. And if I could do it all over again, I'd make some changes, but I don't have to hold guilt around that. I can just do better, next time and in the future, and impart more. But if we get caught up in guilt, and I see this so often with the mums that I work with when they deal with their mum stuff, because everybody's got mum issues, right? We just do. And doesn't matter how hard we work, we're never going to get it right. But I say to them, if if your child came to me for this same therapy, would you want them to work through the stuff they have with you, or would you want them to hold on to that and have it impact them for the rest of their life? And they go, oh no, I want them to work through it. Okay, good. So what do you think your mum would want? Do you think she'd want you to work through this so you actually can have a proper relationship with her, or do you think she would prefer you to sit in this pain? But it actually takes a lot to look at our mums and the conflict between them, or between us and our mums, and as a mother, sit in that and know that our children could one day say the same thing about us. That takes a lot of courage, and it takes a huge sense of responsibility. I actually spoke at the home birth conference this month in Adelaide, which was cold. Thanks, Kath.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But we talked about the mother-daughter mosaic and how those shards are passed down, and how it impacts every part of our parenting. And matrescence, that journey into motherhood, is just one moment where we have to really look at our how we were parented and how we want to move forward. But as I said, you get to take those pieces and make something beautiful if you want to, or you can leave them scattered everywhere and step on them and hurt yourself. That's fine. But what if you actually did something really cool with it and made it something special for yourself and the future generations? But that's where the piece is, right? You get to choose. That's it. I'm done, I think, for now.
Amazing points. Like just pondering on the whole scenario around conflict, and working with the group last night, it came up perfectly. And as well as like we're saying in this conversation, like parenting is like the quickest way to learn all your shit, all your challenges, all your underlying and unconscious patterns and behaviors, because it's right in your face when something's happening, and it happens and you're like, oh, did I just say that? Oh, dad used to do that, or mum used to do that. And you catch yourself, like, as much as you think you're a different person and you've done a lot of work to shift, it catches up with you. And this is a lot of stuff that I do with the guys is I like to say is like getting conscious of the unconscious. The unconscious patterns that happen. It's like people are going on a diet, and it's like, I'm not having that chocolate cake that's sitting in the fridge. I'm not going to eat that chocolate cake. I'm not going to eat that chocolate cake. I'm not going to have that chocolate cake. 5 minutes later, you turn back around, just a little slice. Next thing you know, the whole cake's gone. Underlying in there, there's a pattern in there that's protecting you or saving you or helping you in some form. And so it's no different. Like, it doesn't always mean that it's a positive thing in the outcome, but the pattern and the behavior is self-preservation. And so the conflict always begins with ourselves, right? So even if it's conscious or unconscious, the pattern that is showing up in our conflict is just showing how we react and deal with stressful situations. Now that's the work is like catching yourself and being able to step aside for that moment and pull back. And that's where the listening comes into it. It gives you that space rather than go and react. You can sit there for a moment, have your internal dialogue going on, as well as listening, and take notes of what's actually going on. A thing that came up last night, or two things actually, along these lines of, one was there was a lady in there, and we were doing a breathwork session, and she's like, I feel comfortable and numb, like from my chest down, and I'm really comfortable there. I'm really relaxed. And then she goes, I just can't from my chest up. It was all tense, and I wouldn't let go and wouldn't drop into that space. And a simple thing what we did, because part of our work last night was going into different elements of ourselves, different parts, and just tuning into what's going on at the moment. So it's just like hand on heart, giving yourself some space just to sit there, because doing that naturally is like a comforting thing. It helps you comfort. So giving someone permission to give themselves comfort and give themselves love was that space. And then I dialed into that, and I was like, why it's coming from here is where we're holding on to self-talk, our self-confidence, our self-awareness. And then she goes, it was really tight in my throat. It's like that conversation with herself wasn't happening. And it's like, once we tapped into that, you could see the emotion come up, welling up. unconsciously negative talk about ourselves, because she'll say, oh, I'm always talking great about myself and this, things and this. But then when we tapped into it and dived a little deeper and allowed her to sit with the voice and sit with the conflict that's happening internally, it gave her, or she gave herself permission to really feel it. And once we feel those things, it's like that inner child work or the parts integrations. It's the elements that are sitting there to help us and to save us and protect us in some form. But you can sit with that and say, I see you. That's that little child that's never been seen or heard. So you can sit there with them and go, and sit with yourself and go, I see you, I feel you, because you can physically feel it. And what tends to happen more often than not, by that simple acknowledgement, it allows the tension to drop and the conflict to ease, and them to get a conscious awareness of the unconscious patterns that are creating that conflict within themselves and that self-talk of doubting themselves so often. And that then, I guess, in the outside world, outside of yourself, the conflict then happens. If someone triggers those things and your protective inner self goes, oh, hang on, I need to protect myself, that's when the conflict kicks in. So it's all self unconsciously coming out in a conscious way to someone who's there to show you that there's something going on here. And if you can get conscious enough in that moment, which is sitting and listening, and go, okay, well, I have this thing going on. Don't know how to deal with it or work with it. And that's why you got your geniuses in the platform here to help you through that, just simply by awareness. It can help people to minimize the conflict. And this is my vision and what I see in the future of our work and what we're doing is the more in tune and tapped into people in themselves, it allows them to be at ease with others because the conflict is minimized. And then compassion happens. Go, I see that you're in pain. I'll step aside and drop my ego and not have to push against that and maybe guide you and help you through that. And I think it's such a powerful space if we can offer the simplicity of just sitting, not only listening to others, but listening to self in those moments when we're in pain. And then the second part was we were talking about challenges when they come up. And there was a metaphor of the buffalo when there's a storm coming across the plains. The buffaloes don't turn and run from the storm, they turn and run through the storm. So the quickest way sometimes when we're feeling the conflict or the challenge or the emotion is to sit with it, and you'll get through it quicker. Because a lot of human reaction is run from the pain. let's escape. Challenge is hard. So if we can sit with it for that moment, we'll get through quicker. And that's the evolution of shifting, right?
And it's a huge part of what's missing for most people based on how they were parented, right? So most parents, and this is what I find in the people I work with, most people aren't comfortable sitting with their own pain, and they've never been taught how to do that, which means that they don't know how to sit with their kids' pain or even just their kids' discomfort. And we talk about, even the way we interact with each other and our friends, if somebody's not feeling, if somebody's angry or if somebody's sad, we try to move them through that really quickly rather than sitting with them in it. And I certainly, you don't want them to be in the pain any longer than they need to, but what if they actually need to learn something being in that space? Being angry and is there to teach you a lesson. Being sad is there to teach you a lesson. Being happy is a lesson. There's a lesson in every feeling. And if we're not allowed to feel it and learn the lesson, we're going to have to keep going through it, right? So what if as a people, we started to sit with each other and be okay with holding each other in our pain, allow our kids to be upset and angry if they're upset and angry, rather than saying, I'm working with somebody at the moment, and he was like, well, I send my kid for a timeout, and and then I just tell him as soon as he calms down, he can come out, and the sooner he calms down, he can come out. I'm like, but mate, you're not actually helping him regulate. You're not actually being with him in that moment and giving him the capacity to work through it. He's 6. He doesn't have the capacity to do that. And ultimately, he will, but only if you show him how. What if instead of, segregating him because his emotions are uncomfortable for you, you show him compassion and sit with him and say, I know, and I teach my daughter this. We tell Paisley, I know you're angry that you can't have the chocolate. I get that. It sucks when you don't get to have what you want. But it's not time for chocolate right now. You're about to go to bed, and we don't need the sugar right now to go to bed. But you're allowed to be angry that you can't have it. I get that. And I'll sit with you and hold you. And she just flips so quickly back into, oh, okay. And then she moves on. But it's because we're just sitting with her in that. And I think if we can all, as human beings, stop, I guess, judging our emotions, stop judging whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion. There's comfortable emotions and there's uncomfortable emotions, and then there's really great emotions, right? Which we all, but we don't have them all the time either. And could you imagine walking around ecstatic all the time? It takes a lot of energy. I'm not sure I've got that much, but it's about being able to sit with them though, and having just experiencing them for what they are without judgment, without, putting a label on it. It's a bad emotion. We have to get through this or move it on or whatever. Learn from it, sit with it, and then take the lesson on. And if it's not serving you anymore, then move it,
I think also, if I can add, one of the other things that I had to learn, except for listening and, taking responsibility, was actually learning how to feel and, learn how to feel that emotion. Because growing up, I was made ashamed of, when I was crying. I was made ashamed, like, you're weak. You go and stand in the corner, where you belong. You're a child, you're a this, you're a that, and shaming me for having that feeling. Or stop crying, and then you grow up and then you don't want to feel it. So I didn't want to feel it. So when I was going through coaching sessions, this coach of mine said, what are you avoiding? You have to go through this. And I'm like, no, like, listen to me, mate. If someone is going to cry in this session, it's going to be you. Because I didn't want to feel it. But the moment I allowed myself to feel it, it was terrible. It was terrible. I didn't want to be there. It consumed me. It took me to this awful place. But then she allowed me to really understand how to feel it. Like Paul said, hand on heart, love yourself while you're doing this. Love yourself. It's okay. It's okay to feel it. What do you want to say to that person? So it's oh my gosh, I love this topic. I just love, getting better and healing and allowing others to just heal also in the process.
Yeah, I love that. And can I just flag to the whole team, if I'm ever elevated, public service announcement, don't ask me to calm down. It's not going to end well for anybody. Because at the point I've escalated, like, those are the words that are going to, like, skyrocket me. I'm like, I don't think so, buddy. So yeah, you want to meet them where they are. Sometimes you just need a witness. That's all you need, is a witness. Bethany, you had your hand up, darling. Did you want to say something?
I was going to mention that the lovely other people have spoken often about situations where they have some modicum of control. So whether it be therapeutic or family-oriented. Previously to being disabled, I was a police officer. And conflict is an everyday realization with very real outcomes of harm to others and yourself. And I think that it's important to mention the ability to diffuse that situation there and then. We don't always have that luxury of revisiting it or exploring it further down the track. It's often there now, trauma-inspired, needs to be dealt with. And I'm little. I'm 5'2". There's not much to me. Yet I found the way to calm down some of these people who are often not in their right mind. They're affected by drugs, alcohol, heightened state, so many different factors involved. And the ability to communicate and bring them down is so important. So simple things such as active listening, repeating back to them, parroting, all those basic things that I see you, I hear you, not meeting that volume. If they're yelling and screaming at you, bring it down. You can't hear me unless you calm down as well. And mindfulness, bringing people back to the here, the now, rather than the catastrophizing or other sort of avenues that they may be following. And I think that's really important to mention, that we don't always have the luxury of time.
It's so important, and it's a safety issue, isn't it? I mean, what you're saying, Bethany, that's what I witnessed in that manager in Sainsbury's.
Yes.
Was she would listen to the person and repeat back to them what they'd said.
Yep.
And so they knew she was listening. Yeah, totally. And interestingly, on a slight segue to that, that's what I've learned being a parent to neurodiverse kids, is when they would escalate, I would just be like the person holding the string on the kite, right? And then I remember even as babies, like Taya, I've never heard a baby scream like Taya. Like, it was shocking. And she was just obviously sensory overload. I didn't know at the time. I didn't know she was autistic then. And she was a baby, like really little, because she was premature as well. My God, she would scream and scream and scream. And I would put her cheek to my cheek, and my eardrums were like about to explode because she was really screaming loud. And I just whisper really quietly. And I turn off the lights and I just like regulate her. And then in the end, she would de-escalate and she would listen to me. And my eardrums were like, yeah, but she would. And that's how I was managed to calm her, because I was able to bring her down. So I think not take her down, it's a different thing, but just bring her down from that state. Yeah. But I think it is really important. And there are times when, as you would know, being on the front line, Bethany, that conflict can be fatal. And I mean, Shirley, she's been threatened with a gun, so she understands what being in that situation is like. And you know, it's interesting to be able to how far we can regulate ourselves, as Paul was saying, as to how we can turn up in those situations and help regulate the other people in the scenario. So I think that's really important, and it comes back to our whole mission, which is to help people to heal, dissolve what's no longer working for them, amplify their strengths, help them with the areas that need working on in a really accessible way, without judgment, without criticism. Because one of the biggest things as well, and one of the things that we're trying to disrupt here in this room, is the shame of making mistakes, the shame of not being perfect, the shame of, we've got to let that go. We've got to be honest and go, this is where I messed up. This is the thing. And I'm pretty evolved, but this time I got it wrong. But there's so much shame and fear about sharing those things that people stay stuck, and it festers and it becomes a whole other issue. So that's really important.
Asking for help. The asking for help is sometimes the hardest question to ask. And it's because we are conditioned that that's helplessness, that's not the strength that we should be portraying or whatever. And then there's, of course, the fact that most people have been let down before, and you're having to combat that previous ideal or previous thinking that I will be shut down, I will not be assisted, I will not be given any of those supports because I'm weak.
And yeah, I mean, that's so important. And also communicating that you need help in a way that can be received, and being open to being that space for somebody else. Because I went through, I don't know, a year ago, I went through something personally and I was not coping. like I was not coping. And like I am got loads of qualifications, I've got loads of experience. This is my life, it's my profession, it's my passion, it's my focus. And I was like, I am not coping with this at all. Like really, like nothing was working. I was super triggered. And I went to my husband and said, I'm really not coping with this. And he went, yeah, you'll be fine. Because he's used to me coping. He's used to me being able to take a huge load and being able to do it. And I was like, okay. And that kind of shut me down a little bit. And then I went away and I sat with it. And I came back and I went, okay, I need you to sit down and I need you to listen to me. When I tell you, I am not coping with this particular issue. I am not coping. I need you to step forward. I need you to support me. I need you to talk me through it because I am not regulating. Like I am disproportionately triggered to this and I need support going through it. So it's also about number one, being comfortable enough to go, yeah, you didn't hear me. Like you just, can you actually listen to what I'm saying? Because I'm one that's been used to shut down. I've been used to being shut down because I'm a coper, right? And I remember when I was younger and I had maybe two children under the age of 3. And I had one of my autoimmune flares and I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And I was going down and down and down. And I remember saying to my parents, I'm actually struggling. And for me to say that, I'm quite proud. So for me to do that is quite an alarm. And they went, yeah, but we can't come this way because we're busy. So that was like, I'm not going to ask again, to the point that I was ambulanced into hospital. And they went, you should have asked for help. I went, I did ask for help. And you said you were busy. You know what I mean? So now it's also being able to choose your people and to be able to make sure that if they don't receive what you say the first time, it's not necessarily that they don't care, that they don't want to be there for you. They're distracted or they're used to you being a certain way, but being able to return and circle back and go, I don't think you got the memo. Like, I'm losing it. Like, you really need to help me here. So I think that's really important as well, is to make sure that you're heard by the right person and you do connect with somebody that gets it and can help you through it. And look, that's why we're in the Backyard Peace Project. That's why we're all there, is because there's always someone. We're going to be launching the new platform soon. There's plenty of experts in there. And please don't go to well-meaning Facebook groups to ask for advice. Please. Because there are so many peers in there that are going through their own trauma, their own stresses, their own bias, and they're giving you advice based on their limited experience with no expertise. And it is like watching a car crash in slow motion. Please come to us. It's very affordable. It's very accessible. And you're getting expert advice from people who have lived it, breathed it, studied it, worked in it, professionals with integrity. So I think it's so important. Any finishing words, guys? Because we're at the hour, actually a little bit over the hour, sorry.
I want to add one comment, and we have no time to talk about this because it's a whole topic on itself. This is where it can be very difficult dealing with somebody who has addictions and in the ways that they're asking for help, but it can be they can be abusive of the people who are giving them help. But like I say, I know that's a whole topic on its own, but they can be very, very difficult because there's a level of guilt from your side, right? If you're one of those givers, to try and help them. And of course, they're sometimes right off the rails with what they need. And so those can be very difficult situations to handle.
Yeah, and not just addicts, Connie, but I mean, even people in general who are behaving in ways that repels connection and kindness are often the people that need it the most.
Right.
And when you actually reach through, then they shift. Not all times, I get it, but mostly you can shift and, really make that connection. Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody. Anybody got any last little bits before I end? No? Oh, good. All right. Well, thanks so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to those who are really excited about this meeting, even though you couldn't join. That means that our mission is getting some traction, that you're really leaning into this uncomfortable container, ready for growth and to become the best version of you that you can possibly be, for yourself first, then for your relationships, for your families and your community. So thank you so much for being here, and we shall see you next time.